Milton Moore, Judge Jeff Joyce, Judge Fred Ammon, Councilman Ray Armstrong, and Judge Wilson Rambo. I'm sure I missed somebody, but at least Wendell didn't have to make that mistake. We got a lot of distinguished guests here today, but the most outstanding guest we got today is one of our presidents of the United States, who is famous for his Monroe Doctrine, who has worked with Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers, who helped write some words for the farewell address of George Washington. Let's welcome the 6th President of the United States, alias Bubba Vi, John Quincy Adams.
Okay. It's quite an honor to be here today and to look upon this crowd and understand that how many years has passed since this Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and all of the various Bill of Rights that were given to you and me by the Founding Fathers that we elected duly each time that we went to the polls. It is my pleasure to represent the 6th President of the United States, John Quincy Adams, born 1767 in a little bitty town called Braintree. Braintree was about anywhere from 15 to 30 miles south of Boston. It was founded by a gentleman named Captain John Quincy, who was my mother, Abigail Adams' maternal grandfather. And he actually built a farm on the ocean bay front there, and the place was called later on, rather than Braintree, it was called Quincy. Now, the family name of Quincy is very, very easily said Quincy, but originally it was not Quincy, but Quincy, and it was spelled with as if it was spelled with a Z. Now, there were 19 different U.S. cities that were named Quincy, from Illinois to California. And all of them were, either directly or indirectly, because of John Quincy Adams, who wound up being the 6th President of the United States. But to start with, in his original youth, to identify what he actually did, the first time that he heard about the Constitution of the United States was a letter that was read to him by his mother from his dad, John Adams, who was at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I was 11 years old at that time, and at that time John Adams came home and was sent by the first president, George Washington, to France to get France to acknowledge the young country that we were in fact there. And my mother, who was quite a stern lady, who actually sometimes didn't trust men, because she had a brother who actually became an alcoholic, and she was very stern with her men, people, and her sons, of which she had 3 sons and a daughter, and the daughter's name was Nabby. My mother actually enticed me to go with my dad to France because she knew about those French ladies that walked the streets in France, and she knew that if I was with the father, that everything would work out fine. Absolutely, when I got there, I learned French very fluently. In fact, I enjoyed the language so well that I began writing everything in French. My father actually became quite concerned that I would not learn English and be able not to speak the Queen's English when we returned to America. Upon returning to America, we actually went back to the Netherlands, which was a minister that was awarded to my father from President Washington at that time. And I actually entered into school at the University of Leiden at 12 years old. I graduated at 14, and we came back to the U.S. The intent was for me to enter Harvard University. Well, we presented our case and papers that we were going to apply for admission into Harvard University, And in fact, at age 15, I was rejected. My father was quite taken back. My mother was almost ready to eliminate the family, and they put me to work, and I studied very hard. The next year, I presented myself to the Board of Governors again, and with the paperwork that I had presented them, they were so impressed that they entered me into Harvard University, not as a freshman, but as a junior. In the second year of Harvard University, I graduated with a liberal arts degree. And 2 years later, I had a master's degree and entered a tutelage under a very, very noted lawyer to be an apprentice lawyer just south of Boston. I worked at that task quite hard, and the lawyer was very, very good, and he would turn off all of the heat at night, and that was the only time that I had to study, and it was quite cold. After that happened, I actually went with a gentleman named Francis Dana, who was my tutor at that time, and we went to the Netherlands. And on the way to the Netherlands, and from there on to St. Petersburg, Russia, where we were to have the Russian people to accept the U.S. as a country. And it was not well done, so we came home, and then in one more year I was sent back to the Netherlands from my dad, who was actually elected the second president of the United States, and there I actually was able to write various papers and was able to send these papers back to the U.S., and they were quite well received. In fact, as Fred Hunefeld had identified, I finally found that one of my papers was actually delivered by Washington in his farewell address when he actually left the presidential office. I actually was in Congress and the Senate for almost 30 years, and I was actually elected president and was the 6th president of the United States. The man that I beat out was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was so taken back by not winning that election that he resigned his Senate seat and worked 4 years in order to beat me, and as a result, I was one of the first persons with my father who was only a one-term president. I actually was Secretary of State appointed by James Monroe, and during that tenure, I actually was instrumental in completing 5 different treaties, one of which was the annexation of Florida from Spain. I actually dealt with Spain on the western boundary of the United States, which went all the way to the Pacific Ocean. I actually negotiated with Britain to establish the boundary of the northern boundary of the U.S. with Great Britain that now is borders with Canada. And I actually in 1821, on the 4th of July, I actually watched James Monroe give the address of the Monroe Doctrine that I actually penned at that time. That's one of the great accomplishments that I feel that I did as a member of a citizen of this great country. Again, I want to tell you thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I will turn it back over to Mr. Fred Hunefeld, and I thank you for your attention.
Good job. At this time, we'll have the ringing of the Liberty Bell. I call on